Mr. President,
The Majority Leader.
I ask consent the call quorum be terminated.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the remaining time post-cloture be yielded back and the Senate proceed to consideration of H.A. Res. 66.
Without objection. The clerk will report.
Calendar number 154, H.J. Res. 66, approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003.
Mr. President, I have a substitute amendment that's at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 602.
On that amendment, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a first-degree amendment, which actually a perfecting amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes amendment numbered 603 to amendment numbered 602.
On that, Mr. President, I ask the yeas and nays.
Is there sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment, which is also at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 604 to amendment numbered 603.
I have an amendment at the desk. It's to the language that's proposed to be stricken.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes amendment numbered 605 to the language proposed to be stricken by amendment numbered 602.
I ask for the yeas and nays on that amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment numbered 606 to amendment numbered 605.
I have a cloture motion on the substitute amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the Reed substitute amendment numbered 602 to H.J. Res. 66, a joint resolution approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003, signed by 17 senators as follows. Reed of Nevada.
Mr. President, I ask consent that the names be waived, the reading of the names.
Without objection.
I have a cloture motion on the underlying joint resolution, which is at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on H.J. Res. 66, a joint resolution approving the renewal of import restrictions contained in the Burmese Freedom and Democracy Act of 2003, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask consent, Mr. President, that reading the names be waived.
Without objection.
I have a motion to commit the joint resolution with instructions. That is also at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to commit H.J. Res. 66 to the Finance Committee with instructions to report back with the following amendment numbered 607.
On that, Mr. President, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment to the instructions at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes amendment number 608 to the instructions of the motion to commit H.J. Res. 66.
I ask for the yeas and nays on this amendment.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
The clerk will report.
The Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes amendment number 609 to amendment number 608.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived for the two cloture motions just filed.
Without objection.
Mr. President, sadly, in just 2 days, about 80,000 people will be out of work because of the obstructionism of one man. This senator, the junior senator from Oklahoma, is putting his own petty priorities ahead of the needs of thousands of safety inspectors, construction workers, and contractors who are about to lose their health care and their livelihoods the second time in just the last few months. These workers will be furloughed or laid off on Friday if we don't reauthorize the Federal Aviation Administration legislation. The same senator is holding up emergency funding for thousands of Americans, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands actually, whose homes have been destroyed by tornadoes, floods, and wildfires. Now, Mr. President, keep in mind what I just said. We have a bill that came from the House of Representatives that funded for 4 months the Federal Aviation Administration. We have a bill that has come from the House, they put them together, to fund the highway bill for 6 months. Those two bills together are almost 2 million jobs that would be eliminated if we don't pass the highway bill by the end of the month, but FEMA by Friday. Now, the senator from Oklahoma that I just referred to doesn't like a provision in the highway bill. But stopping that is one thing. But now he's stopping us doing something about the people that are in desperate need of help, who have been hit hard by fires. In Texas alone, we've had 2,000 homes burned to the ground. So he's holding up emergency aid for Americans whose homes have been destroyed by tornadoes, floods, wildfires, farmland, millions of acres underwater, and he's jeopardizing almost 2 million jobs by blocking the highway bill. But how he gets these two together is something I can't logically understand. He is stopping us from doing something on the highway and the FAA bill, but also FEMA. On Friday, as I said, it's going to cause 80,000 workers, thousands of whom are responsible for keeping millions of U.S. air travelers safe every day. We've just been through this, Mr. President. Short time ago, we had the same issue. We had these safety inspectors paying for their own lunches when they go out to inspect an airplane, buying their own plane tickets, buying their own hotel and motel rooms, their own, not being reimbursed. And it's interesting to note, this same senator voted for the highway bill in 2005. We do a bill, major highway bill, about every 5 years. He voted for that bill when his party held the White House, although the bill included the same issue he objects to today. I've been told that his big concern is over bike trails, bike paths. But the interesting part, he can have a vote on this. He wants to vote to get rid of bike paths. He's willing to do that. In fact, we've given him the same vote on the amendment before. 2009, the Senate voted down the very same amendment. He's had this vote before, and it's failed before. But he's not willing to even take a vote anymore. I mean, this is how far afield this is. He didn't want to vote. He wants to put whatever he thinks is the right thing for the world and the country as it relates to highways in this bill. Just do it. I'm a dictator. I'm going to put in this bill, or you're not going to do anything around here. We're willing to vote on this again. We can't get to a vote on his amendment because he's blocking us from doing so. So one senator out of 100 is holding up the important work of this body, demanding that we make this amendment law or else put 80,000 people out of work. This kind of obstruction should end. This is not logical. It's not rational. My friend has strong feelings about this part of the highway bill. But this is a bill that has billions of dollars in it, about 1.7 or 8 million jobs. These will be eliminated if we don't get this thing passed. So I would urge my Republican colleague to reconsider how this gridlock harms real people in this country. It's hard for me to explain. You know, we in Las Vegas, we have a new tower that's being built for the air traffic controllers. It's needed very, very much. Air traffic into Las Vegas is heavy, about 60 million a year. People come in there, and we need a new tower. We started construction on it a few months ago. It was held up once because of this problem we had with the bill before. Now it's going to be held up again. But this isn't just a Nevada issue, it's all over the country. About 75,000 construction workers are working on essential parts of our airports. Jobs are badly needed, and it's just the wrong thing for my friend to do. And I hope he will allow us to move forward on FEMA, allow us to move forward on the Federal Aviation Administration legislation. And, of course, the highway bill will give him his vote. If he wants another vote, we'll give him another vote. If there's another part of the bill he doesn't like. But it's something we need to get done as quickly as possible, like in the next 24 hours. I ask consent the Senate proceed to appear in morning business. Senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each. Are we on morning business now?
We were not. We will be.
Okay, thanks.
Without objection.
I ask consent, unanimous consent, that the Senate proceed to executive session and the Foreign Relations Committee be discharged from further consideration of presidential nomination 828, Mary DeRosa, to be an alternate representative of the United Nations. Presidential nomination 829, Frankie Lloyd to be an alternate representative of the United Nations. Presidential nomination 830, Kendrick Meek to be a representative of the United Nations. That the nominations be confirmed and blocked, the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid on the table. There be no intervening action or debate, and no further motion be in order to the nominations. That any related statements be printed in the record. That the President be immediately notified of the Senate's action, and the Senate then resume legislative session.
Without objection.
I ask consent the Senate proceed to consideration of S-Res 267.
The clerk will report.
SRES 267, recognizing Hispanic Heritage Month and celebrating the heritage and culture of Latinos in the United States and the immense contributions of Latinos to the United States.
Is there objection to proceeding to the measure? Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent the resolution be agreed to, the preamble be agreed to, the motion reconsider be laid on the table, there be no intervening action or debate, and that any statements related to this matter be placed in the record as made.
Without objection.
I now ask unanimous consent the Senate, when the Senate completes its business tonight, it adjourn until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning, Thursday, September 15th. Following the prayer and the pledge, journal proceedings be approved to date. The morning hour be deemed expired, and the time for the two leaders be reserved for use later in the day. Following any leader remarks, the Senate be in a period of morning business for up to 1 hour, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each during that time, with the time equally divided and controlled between the two leaders or the designees, with the majority controlling the first half and the Republicans controlling the final half. And the following morning business, Senate resume consideration of H.A. Res. 66.
Without objection.
I also, Mr. President, that when the Senate completes its business today, it adjourn as a further mark of respect to the memory of the late Senator Malcolm Wallet of Wyoming.
Without objection.
We're now considering the Burma sanctions and FEMA legislation. As a reminder, I have filed a cloture on the substitute amendment and the joint resolution today. If no agreement is reached, a cloture vote on the substitute amendment will occur Friday morning. The filing deadline for all first-degree amendments to H.J. Res. 66 and the substitute amendment is 1 p.m. tomorrow. However, we hope to reach an agreement to complete consideration of H.J. Res. 66, FAA, and the highway extension during tomorrow's session. Senators will be notified when votes are scheduled. As things now stand, we're going to have a series of votes on Friday. If there's no further business to come before the Senate, I ask that we adjourn under the previous order as a mark of respect to the memory of the late Senator Malcolm Wallet of Wyoming.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands adjourned until 9:30 a.m. tomorrow and does so as a further mark of respect to the memory of former Senator Malcolm Wallet.
Today, the U.S. Senate is continuing work on a bill renewing trade